All right, Gator fans, we have Neil Blackmon of Saturday Down South and Gator Basketball Hour back with us because, of course, we do. The Gators have advanced and we need to talk to you about it. Okay, so quick thoughts before we get into the Maryland game. Quick thoughts on the UConn game. Was there anything that concerned you that you saw or things that maybe UF needs to clean up a little bit?
Well, UConn's really hard to guard the way that they play. So that challenge is kind of unique to them, the way that they run offense. So I think for me, it was just turnovers. Florida had their second highest turnovers in a first half this season in that game with the 9 turnovers. They've got to take care of the ball better if they want to win 2 games this weekend or even 1 game this weekend.
Okay, so let's get into Maryland. You told me that you thought that they were the team that was the biggest roadblock to UF getting to the Final Four in this region. So I want to revisit your pre-tournament thoughts. Tell me what you think about them, and then has that changed at all so far through the first weekend of the tournament?
It hasn't changed just because of how they play. Like Maryland will. The one thing that I think might be encouraging, I guess, is that Maryland wants to play fast. They want to play up and down. And I think this Gators team tends to struggle more when they have to have these kind of grinded out half court games. Maryland is less interested in a grinded out half court game. They'll be happy to run up and down with Florida. I think that it's still the biggest challenge. That the reality is this will be the first game. I mean, you could make the argument, I guess, with Liam McNeely, but it's certainly a better argument with Derek Queen, Maryland's star freshman, that they'll have the best player, the most talented player on the floor. Maybe not the best player, but certainly the most talented player. And then they play like Florida in the sense that they have 2 big men that they play all the time around 3 guards. So Florida's not going to have any necessary size advantage. They're not going to have any obvious front court advantage. They're not going to be obviously more athletic than Maryland like they were against UConn. There were moments in the UConn game where UConn really did seem kind of small and slow compared to Florida. That won't necessarily be the case against the Terps. Florida does have better guards. Jacoby Gillespie, Maryland's point guard, is very good. And when he does not turn the ball over, you can see why Todd Golden was very interested in having him at Florida, recruited him pretty hard in the portal. But Florida has the advantage at guard like they do in every game that they play. Yep, every single game. So really, to me, this game boils down to Alex Condon. And like if Florida gets the Alex Condon that was at the SEC tournament, they're going to be fine. If they get the Alex Condon that just played 2 of the less compelling games that he's played all year in Raleigh, then Thursday night could be the last game for the Gators.
So, where do you think? I mean, Florida needs their team to play their game no matter what, and Condon having a great game is a part of that. But where in Maryland's games are things that Florida could potentially exploit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Maryland does not offensive rebound much. They are one of the worst offensive rebounding teams left in the NCAA tournament. They rank 149th in that category. Because of Derek Queen and Julian Reese, they do defensive rebound quite well. But they're not going to crash the glass. So Florida is great at first shot defense. Usually the Gators can slip some when they give up an offensive rebound, and then there's a kick out 3 or sort of a put back bucket, something like that. So Florida needs to continue to play good first shot clock defense, which they have done better than almost anyone left in the field this season. They're 3rd out of the 16 teams left in that category. So that's, I think, one area. And then depth. Maryland plays 6 players. They played their starting 5. All 5 of their starters played over 30 minutes in the Colorado State game.
Really quickly, wanted to shout out BetUS TV and all their coverage of all of March Madness over on social media. Right now, the Gators are a 6-point favorite versus Maryland today, and they've got great coverage on social media that you need to go take a peek at. I appreciate BetUS TV for their support.
They had 1 bench player play 10 minutes or more. So, there's 2 ways to kind of evaluate depth. There's the idea that you can overwhelm someone with it. which has long been kind of the school of thought for John Calipari or, Leonard Hamilton, someone like that. And then there's the idea that why do I need depth when I can play 5 players that are constantly in rhythm? And that was sort of Mike Krzyzewski's
Hmm.
philosophy. Roy Williams is another one who constantly 10, 11 guys, just waves of players. I think in a high tempo game, I do think Florida's depth matters. I
Yeah.
do think Maryland will tire. Maryland's 1-3 against the rest of the Sweet 16 in the games they've lost, which have all been close. I think fatigue has been a factor. They've lost leads in the final 10 minutes in 4 of their 6 losses. I think there's a chance that the Gators wear them out.
So we talked to Seth Greenberg yesterday, and that was what he felt like was one of Florida's biggest advantages. He said he refers to Florida as Noah's Ark. They've got 2 of everything, and that is such a huge advantage for Florida over the Crab Five. But let's talk a little bit more about Maryland's roster. You mentioned Queen, you mentioned Gillespie, you mentioned Reese, but are there any other players that UF fans need to be aware of?
So to me, like kind of breaking this down on Florida Basketball Hour last night, the guy that really comes to mind for us is Selton Miguel because he's the most Florida's going to have a size and physicality advantage in the backcourt against Gillespie and against Rodney Rice. So Selton Miguel is a little more Elijah Martin-y. He's 6'4", 220. He's a big guy. He was a really good high school football player, sort of like Elijah and Walt. Um, and he's a guy who can make tough twos inside in addition to shooting threes. He's not just a guy that they put on the perimeter to hit shots. Now, Maryland is a great three-point shooting team. They shoot 38% out there. Selton Miguel's the guy who can make the tough ones. A lot of Maryland's threes are really, really open. It was amazing watching like the film of them
Yeah.
and the way that teams have to double team Derek Queen, create defensive
Allows.
collapse. Yeah, it creates
Yeah.
a lot of kickouts. And Queen and Reese are good at getting those guys the ball, and they're good at getting the shots off. Miguel's the one guy who, when guarded, I think can make tough shots. He's sort of their X factor, I think.
So the Gators are a 6.5 point favorite. ESPN gives them a 61% chance of winning, which, so they're saying essentially Florida would win this thing 6 out of 10 times. Does it seem that close to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the other thing that Florida could do because of Florida's depth, and I'm sure Seth talked about this, is Julian Reese and Derek Queen have done a great job of staying out of foul trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Reese has been a little more susceptible to foul trouble than Queen has, mostly because they move Queen all over the place, and it's a little easier to not commit as many fouls when you're not banging down underneath the basket the whole game. I think if Florida can get Julian Reese into some foul trouble and make him timid near the basket, maybe that gets to like a 75-25 situation. But yeah, I mean, I think 6 out of 10 is very fair. Again, the number for me, is 14. Like I think if Florida is above 14 turnovers, they're going to have a problem. I think if they're under that, then watch that number. And if Florida's under 14 turnovers, I do expect them to win because I think just top to bottom, as good as Maryland's starting 5 is, and it's great. EvanMia.com says it's the 5th best starting 5 in America. Well, Florida's starting 5 is 4th.
Right.
So it's like, it's kind of comforting if you're a Florida fan to be like, yeah, they had this awesome group and it's actually not as good as Florida's
Right.
best group.
And then you factor in depth. But
Right. Yep.
okay. So we asked you about an X factor before the first weekend. Who do you think it's going to be against Maryland tomorrow?
Oh, I still think it's Will Richard. Like I mentioned how important it is for Alex Condon to play well. And I do think that is super vital. But I thought low key the UConn game was the Will Richard legacy game.
Yeah.
There were like moments early in the second half when it seemed like UConn had control of the game, and then Will Richard scored like 7 points in a row.
There was a
Um,
certain point where he seemed like the only one that was like fully all in.
100%, like the guy that was engaged, that was
Mhm.
firing up the sideline.
Yes.
Um, And then he made obviously the huge play on Caravan that led to the run out dunk that extended the lead from 62-61 to 64-61. And before that, he forced a solo ball turnover after Walt had the horrendous turnover. And it looked like UConn might go up by
Yeah.
5
Yeah.
before all of the Clayton heroics. So Florida doesn't win that game without Will Richard. It's been that way a lot this season. And I'll tell you one anecdote that I got from a staff member that I'm sure they'd be happy if I shared, but it was they got back to the huddle down 3 points with 3:41 to go. And, Todd was like, "How you guys feeling?" And Will Richard just looked at everybody and said, "Hey guys, it's our time. We are advancing." And everybody was just kind of like, "Okay." And so they
Right,
did.
let's
So
do it. Very
Will Richard,
Tebow-esque.
he's that dude. And, I'm all for more Will Richard's dad on TV too.
Oh, I'm here for Will Richard's dad for sure. All right, do you have a prediction going into this?
Yeah, I think Florida wins. I think they win narrowly. The Ken Palm prediction right now is 81-75 Florida. I'll go 82-77. I
Okay,
think
so
the
I
Gators
did not know that,
do
and I
win.
said 81-74. So
That's amazing. I love it.
basketball
So,
savant over here. Didn't
yeah, I'm going 82-77. And I do think this is the big one for Florida. Like I have said consistently that Florida matches up better with Texas Tech than they
yeah.
do Maryland. Florida certainly matches up well with Arkansas. So to me, this is the biggest game on the way to San Antonio.
Whew. All right, Neil, tell everybody where they can follow you and find your work.
Thank you. Yeah, follow me on X at NW Blackmon, MON at the end, or Florida Basketball or at Florida BB Hour. Always appreciate you having me.
All right, we appreciate it. This was fun. We'll advance and then we can do it again.
Thank you.